Mount Vesuvius erupted one afternoon and wiped a city clean off the map. It buried the Roman town of Pompeii under ash, and it froze everything there right in the middle of a normal day. That ash preserved it for centuries. So what was a disaster also became a kind of discovery. It created this perfect time capsule. We know the sequence of events now, minute by minute, from the first tremors to the final wave that covered everything. Science can read the layers of ash. It's like a forensic report. It shows why some people fled and why others stayed behind. That sudden, intense heat was the key. It's what preserved things, and that's how a place of tragedy became a window into the heart of a whole civilization. The morning of August 24th, 79 started like any other day in Pompeii. The sun came up and the city was already moving. In the bakeries, they lit the ovens and the smell of bread was in the air. Over at the public baths, people were gathering to talk, to do business, steam rising from the pools into the cool air. Kids were running through the streets, through the forums, their laughter bouncing off the walls covered in ads and graffiti. And all of this daily life, it was happening in the shadow of the mountain to the north. They just called it the mountain. To them, Mount Vesuvius wasn't a threat, it was a provider. Its slopes were fertile, covered in vineyards. They produced some of the best wine in the region. The volcano had been quiet for centuries, so long that its violent history had faded from memory, turned into myth. Generations had lived there, thrived there on its flanks. That created a deep sense of security, a tragic one. But underneath that peaceful surface, huge forces were at work. Geologists now call Vesuvius a stratovolcano. That type, it's known for long quiet periods and then catastrophic explosive eruptions. For hundreds of years, the mountain had been in one of those quiet phases. But that silence, as volcanologists explain, it wasn't emptiness, it was a buildup. Magma was slowly rising. Gases were dissolving under tremendous pressure. It was a natural clock counting down to zero. The people of Pompeii, about 11,000 of them, they had no idea they were living on a geological powder keg. Their city was a prosperous Roman port, a tapestry of homes, shops, temples, theaters. All of it frozen later that day in mid-stride. We know the texture of their lives from the small details. A loaf of bread carbonized in an oven, a message on a wall about a lost necklace, the mosaic floors in wealthy villas. This vibrant, complacent world was about to hit a raw planetary power it couldn't understand. Pompeii stands as a lesson about the balance between human ambition and the patient, immense forces of the earth. This was the calm, a bustling, ordinary calm. And it would shatter in the early afternoon. The ground around Pompeii had been shaking for years, decades really. There was a major earthquake in '62. It was powerful. It broke statues, knocked down columns, cracked the foundations of buildings. The damage was so bad that 17 years later, when the end came, they were still fixing things. You can see it in the ruins. A wall repaired with different bricks, a temple surrounded by scaffolding, a whole town living in the aftermath trying to rebuild. But what they thought was just bad luck was actually a signal from the mountain. Those were volcano-tectonic earthquakes. They happen when magma pushes up through rock. It fractures the earth, creates these sharp, small jolts, the mountain groaning under the pressure. For the people there, the shaking just became normal. Pliny the Younger wrote that later. He said tremors were frequent, and because they were frequent, they weren't alarming. And that's the whole tragedy right there. They'd normalized it. The warning system had become background noise. It's like living by train tracks. The first trains startle you. After a while, you don't hear them anymore. Your brain filters it out. For Pompeii, the rumble was geological, the mountain clearing its throat. We see this pattern now. Before Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980, there were thousands of small quakes, a drumbeat underground. Scientists knew it was an omen, but the Romans, they didn't have that science. So a tremor was just an inconvenience. A cracked wall, spilled wine. An annoyance, not an alarm. That was the first act. A prologue of shudders everyone ignored before the roar that ended everything. Around 1 in the afternoon, the pressure finally won. You can picture a champagne bottle shaken for centuries and the cork finally gives way. That was Vesuvius. The solid rock plug sealing the volcano's throat just shattered. It was a catastrophic failure. And what came next was a release of energy, so immense it's hard to describe. A superheated jet of gas and molten rock and pulverized stone shot straight up into the sky. This is the Plinian phase, named for Pliny the Younger, who saw it and wrote it down. It wasn't just an explosion. It was a sustained fountain, a roaring column. It punched through the atmosphere, climbing to a staggering height. Some estimates say over 20 miles high, pushing into the stratosphere. The physics are terrifying. As the magma rockets upward, the dissolved gases inside expand with incredible force. They shatter the rock into a frothy, lightweight stone, pumice. That creates the column, this churning mixture of heat and debris held aloft by its own furious updraft. And then gravity began to take over. The lighter material at the top of the plume started to drift. A prevailing wind from the northwest caught it. That wind, a simple fact, became a sentence. It pushed the cloud south-southeast directly toward Pompeii. Herculaneum to the west was spared this first phase. For Pompeii, the sky began to change. The first sign was a gentle, almost surreal rain, not of water but of cool gray pumice stones. They're called lapilli, porous and lightweight like rocky hailstones. At first they clattered on rooftops and streets, an odd nuisance, but they fell with growing intensity, a relentless accumulating shower. To grasp the scale, you can look at a modern comparison. The 1991 eruption of Mount in the Philippines, that was one of the largest of the 20th century. It also had a colossal Plinian column that darkened skies and reshaped landscapes. The people of Pompeii were witnessing a similar world-altering spectacle. The sun vanished behind a curtain of ash. The air grew thick, difficult to breathe. This was the point of no return. What began as a curious patter on the tiles was becoming a crushing weight. A literal mountain beginning to fall from the sky, one stone at a time. The sky was turning to stone. That gentle patter became a roar, a downpour of gray rock from a black sky. Daylight vanished within an hour. It was just darkness, an oppressive dark. The air grew thick with fine ash, people covering their mouths with cloth. Their world was the dim glow of oil lamps and the constant sound of impact. This was the pyroclastic fall. The mountain was dismantling itself above them, and the pieces were raining down. Pliny the Younger watched from across the bay. He described a spectacle, a terrifying beauty. He wrote about broad sheets of fire leaping from the mountain, flames against the dark sky. He was seeing volcanic lightning, electrical storms inside the churning ash cloud, a fitting display. The pumice accumulated fast, about 6 inches every hour. At first it was a nuisance in the streets, then it became a trap. These lightweight porous stones piled up, filling courtyards, stairwells, alleyways, but the real danger was overhead. Roman roofs weren't built to hold the weight of a mountain. They began to groan, then crack, then they collapsed. Entire families had sought shelter in their homes, believing the stone walls would protect them. They were buried where they sat. Archaeology shows this first phase. The stratigraphy, the soil layers, shows a distinct stratum of gray pumice, several feet thick in places, and within that layer, the resting places of those who didn't escape in time. This phase lasted for hours, a slow-motion disaster, and it created a choice. The bombardment was relentless, but it was localized. It was a fall, not a flow. The material came straight down from the sky. So if you could brave the darkness, the choking air, the pelting rocks, you could still walk out of the city. Many did. They fled toward the coast, into the countryside, clutching their most precious things. That's why so many victims found later had coins, keys, jewelry. They were prepared for a journey, not for the end. For scale, there's the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. Its ash cloud circled the globe. Fallout disrupted life hundreds of miles away, grounded plains, coated cities. But for Pompeii, it was infinitely more concentrated. They weren't on the fringe of the fallout zone. They were directly beneath it. The world became a suffocating, pitch-black tomb of accumulating rock, a prelude written in stone. The city was becoming a maze, roofs collapsing, shadows deepening. And in that chaos, a simple question: do we stay or do we go? There was no alarm, no official word, just the sound from the sky and the reality outside the door. This was a crisis of perception. A volcanic eruption wasn't a known thing for them. They had no word for pyroclastic flow. Their whole frame of reference was built on earthquakes, on storms, events you could wait out indoors. So the instinct to shelter, to trust the stone of your home, it was logical. It was also, for many, a fatal one. Disaster sociologists have a term: normalcy bias. It's the brain's tendency to believe that because something has never happened, it won't happen now. The mind downplays clear danger because accepting it would shatter your understanding of the world. In Pompeii, this bias was reinforced by generations of peace. The mountain had always been a gentle giant. Surely this strange, ashen storm would pass. So families gathered in interior rooms, huddled together, hoping the walls would hold. Others made a different calculation. They saw the weight accumulating, felt the house shudder, and chose the unknown perils of flight over the certain collapse of their shelter. The escape itself was a harrowing journey. Imagine running through streets buried in knee-deep pumice, in near-total darkness, hot ash stinging your eyes, clogging your lungs. The main road south toward the sea gate and the harbor became choked. Choked with people and debris, they carried what they could, small bundles, a family heirloom, a pouch of coins for the journey they still believed lay ahead. The archaeology of this moment is heartbreakingly clear. Near the city's gates, in gardens under colonnades, they've found clusters of individuals, often grouped together, sometimes with their most precious possessions beside them. These weren't people caught unaware, they were people in motion. People who had decided to flee but were overcome before they could find clear ground. We see similar patterns now in modern eruptions with the benefit of warnings. During the 2010 eruption of Mount in Indonesia, officials ordered a massive evacuation. Yet some residents, tied to their land and livestock, they hesitated. They believed they knew the mountain's moods, that they could outsmart it. Timely evacuations saved tens of thousands. But those who stayed too long, often from that same normalcy bias, they faced the worst. The people of Pompeii had no such warnings, only their instincts and a rapidly deteriorating world. Every choice made in fear and confusion wrote a different ending. For those who left early, there was a chance. For those who waited, trusting the familiar walls, the greatest danger was still coming. The mountain was only just beginning. The gentle rain of stone was just the opening. A slow suffocation that would soon be followed by something far swifter and utterly inescapable. The gentle rain of stone was one thing, a slow, constant threat, but then the physics changed. In the early evening, as it got dark, the column of ash and gas just stopped holding itself up. It couldn't support its own weight anymore. That's column collapse. The whole thing miles high, it toppled over. And it didn't just fall. It came down the mountain as a ground-hugging, incandescent avalanche. A pyroclastic density current, a river of superheated gas and fine ash and pulverized rock, the deadliest weapon a volcano has. He studied the victims. His work shows the power of these things. They move at speeds over 60 miles an hour, temperatures of 500 degrees. It's not just hot air, it's a fluidized, searing cloud. It hugs the ground and it scorches everything. It smothers everything. The first major surge went west, toward Herculaneum by the sea. The effect was total, instantaneous. The heat was so intense it vaporized organic material on contact, just left shadows in the ash. There are two forms this takes. A pyroclastic surge is the faster one, more dilute. It's a turbulent cloud. It can leap over ridges, rush into valleys. A pyroclastic flow is denser, heavier, an avalanche of debris that follows the land's contours. At Vesuvius, both happened, one after the other. For a modern example, there's Mount, in the Caribbean on Martinique, 1902. It produced a directed surge like this. It obliterated the city of Saint-Pierre in moments. Tens of thousands of lives. A ship in the harbor had its metal rigging melted by the heat, a 20th century reminder of the force Pompeii faced. So this was an escalation. The threat wasn't from the sky anymore. It was racing across the land, an inescapable wave of radiant heat and suffocating ash. The rules of survival changed. For anyone still in Pompeii under those buckling roofs, the danger was being rewritten by a cloud moving faster than a galloping horse. The mountain saved its most efficient weapon for last, and it was turning toward the city. The wave came in silence, a sudden, searing quiet. It was near dusk, but you couldn't tell. The first direct pyroclastic surge, probably the second or third from the collapsing column, finally came over the northern walls of Pompeii. This wasn't the dense, slow flow of rock that would come later. This was a fast, turbulent cloud, a ground-hugging fog of superheated gas and fine ash, still blisteringly hot from its race down the mountain, though diluted by the distance. Its speed was deceptive. It didn't knock buildings over. It just filled every space, every street. Every room left open to the outside in an instant. For anyone still sheltering inside, the end was swift. The surge came through doorways, windows, any crack or opening. It replaced the choking but breathable air with fine volcanic ash and toxic gases. But the main killer in that first wave was heat, thermal shock. The temperature of the surge, even that far out, was likely several hundred degrees Celsius. Exposure to that, even for one breath, is instantly lethal. The human body reacts in a specific way. Muscles contract violently from the extreme heat, pulling the limbs into a defensive stance, a boxer's stance. Forensic archaeologists call it the pugilistic posture. It's a silent, frozen signature of a death that was instantaneous and agonizingly brief. We see this evidence in the distinct layer of ash and small rock fragments, lithics, that settled right on top of the earlier pumice fall. In that gray stratum, the stories are preserved. In the Garden of the Fugitives, a group of 13 people were found together. They weren't in their homes. They were caught in the open, maybe making a final, desperate dash across a vineyard when the cloud them. Their postures tell of a sudden collective end. That pattern repeats across the northern sectors of the city. The surge demonstrated a new rule, a horrifying one. The sturdy stone walls that had offered shelter from the falling rock were now a trap. They couldn't keep out this fluid, gaseous enemy. A modern parallel helps. In 1997, the Hills volcano on Montserrat produced a series of pyroclastic flows. One particular surged all expectations. It traveled up and over a ridge that was thought to be a safe barrier. Then it rushed down into valleys where it wasn't anticipated. It led to tragic loss of life. It showed that these clouds don't simply follow the ground. They can surge over obstacles, fill low areas, behave in unpredictable ways. The first surge into Pompeii likely behaved like that, seeking paths of least resistance, flowing through streets like a deadly, silent tide. This initial assault was the volcano's most destructive weapon making its introduction. It proved that no interior room, no basement, no perceived stronghold was safe anymore. The nature of the threat had fundamentally changed, and for anyone still alive in the smothered, darkened city, the most concentrated fury was still building. Preparing for its final, annihilating descent, the silent surge was just the start. That night, the mountain's fury found a rhythm. It began to pulse. After that first catastrophic column collapsed, Vesuvius didn't settle. It moved into a new phase. Partial columns would build up, then topple over again. Each collapse sent another river of destruction along the ground, racing down the slopes. For hours through the night of August 24th and into the early morning of the 25th, the region was hit by wave after wave. This wasn't one event, it was a siege. Geologists can read the layers now, they can count the attacks. The stratigraphy at Pompeii shows at least 6 distinct pyroclastic deposits stacked on top of that initial pumice fall. Each layer is like a page in a diary. And as you move up through them, the layers change. The early ones still have some of that lightweight pumice. But the later waves become denser, heavier. They have more fine ash and more lithic fragments, chunks of the mountain's own cone, torn apart and carried in the flow. That tells a story. The eruption was evolving, digging deeper, becoming more violent and more efficient at burying everything. With each new wave, the temperature went up. The destructive power increased. Later flows were so hot they carbonized wood on contact. They turned beams and doors into charcoal instantly. They were denser, too. More like a fluidized avalanche of rock than a fast-moving cloud. And these dense pyroclastic flows have a particular capability. They don't just fill spaces, they exert pressure. They can strip buildings down to their foundations, carry away roofs and upper walls, and then deposit tons of material inside the hollow shells that are left. They systematically dismantle, and they entomb. To understand this kind of sustained, multi-phase eruption, you can look to 1815, to Mount in Indonesia. Its climactic phase also had a series of colossal pyroclastic flows. They radiated out from the volcano and wiped out entire kingdoms on the island of Sumbawa. Its main legacy became global, the year without a summer from all the ash it put into the stratosphere. But for the people near the mountain, the immediate horror was the same. That relentless, wave-like assault, a landscape scoured and buried under successive layers of volcanic debris. Through that long night, this cyclic violence made sure of total destruction. Any structure still standing after the first surge was battered by the second. Any space that was still open was filled by the third. Each wave laid down another blanket. It pressed down, it smothered, it consolidated. The city wasn't just covered, it was laminated, sealed under a thickening, sterile shroud that grew hotter and heavier every hour. This process, this methodical entombment, is what created the perfect preservation we see now. But it was achieved through a night of unimaginable force, a sequence of geological hammer blows that left no possibility of survival. And when the final flow passed and the mountain's roar faded into an eerie morning silence, what remained wasn't a city. It was a mold, a perfect negative impression of a life that was paused, waiting under a gray blanket for a world that would forget it for centuries. Dawn on August 25th wouldn't have brought any light. The world was still a choking gray void, but the mountain's roar was fading. That great engine of destruction was running out of fuel, and in its final act the eruption didn't end with a bang. It ended with a slow, settling sigh. The towering plume of ash, now exhausted, began to collapse under its own weight. This wasn't another violent surge. It was a total surrender to gravity. The entire sky seemed to sink down onto the land. And what fell then was a soft, silent blanket, a deep layer of fine, powdery ash, and within it something strange. Tiny spherical pellets no larger than peas. Geologists call them lapilli. They form high up in the moist eruption cloud when ash particles stick together around a droplet of water, like a snowball rolling in a storm. They fall to earth delicate, often breaking apart on impact. Their presence in the ash layer is a specific fingerprint. It tells volcanologists this was the settling of the plume's very heart, the last exhalation of a dying giant. This final deposit, up to several feet thick, was nature's own perfect sealant. It flowed into every crevice the earlier, coarser material had missed. It molded with precision around the forms it encountered: a fallen beam, a ceramic pot, and the human forms of those who had been overtaken. This is the layer that created the famous voids. The ash settled around them, then hardened over time like cement. Centuries later, archaeologists would pour plaster into those hollow spaces and pull forth the shapes of a lost afternoon. But this capping layer did more. It hermetically sealed the entire city. Think of it like the wax seal on an ancient letter. It protected Pompeii from the elements, from erosion, even from looters. The uniform, fine grain of this ash suggests a calm, catastrophic settling. Everything simply stopped. We see similar ash layers in other epical eruptions. The Minoan eruption of Thera, around 1600 BCE, buried on Santorini under meters of fine pumice and ash. That layer acted as a time capsule too, preserving frescoes and multi-story buildings. It was a preservative of paradox, a product of absolute violence that granted a form of immortality. This silent, ashen snowfall was the last page. It wrote the period at the end of the sentence. Under its weight, the city fell into a profound sleep. The heat faded, the noise ceased. And for the next 1,660 years, Pompeii existed only as a name on a map, a faint, forgotten legend. The mountain had finished its work. It had erased a city from the earth, only to freeze its final moment with a precision we are still learning to read. The sky cleared on August 25th, and the coastline of the Bay of Naples was just gone, replaced by a flat, gray desert. A plain of cooling ash. The eruption was so big it changed the land itself. Pyroclastic flows had pushed into the sea, making the shore hundreds of meters longer in some spots. The river was blocked, its path buried. The mountain was different too. The peak was gone, just a smoldering crater left. The burial was staggering. Pompeii was under a blanket of ash, 13 to 20 feet deep in the town center. Herculaneum to the west got something else. Those hotter, denser flows turned into a rock-like material, tough. It buried that town under 60 feet of it. The destruction spread, was smothered. Villas on the slopes vanished. Pliny the Younger was watching from across the bay. He wrote about the darkness at the peak, like being in a sealed room with no light. Then he described the cloud breaking apart. A fearful black cloud, he said, rent by bursts of flame, showing great tongues of fire like huge lightning. Later, when it cleared, the world was changed, buried in deep ash like snow. This wasn't just a local disaster. The ash layer was sterile. It killed plants, made farming impossible for years. Then the rains came. Water mixed with loose ash on the steep slopes. That created mud flows, lahars. These torrents of volcanic slurry poured down the valleys. They buried anything the first flows missed, reshaping the land all over again. For the people who survived, their world was over. If they came back, there was nothing, just a blank horizon. There were probably attempts to recover. Later historians mention some digging for valuables, maybe trying to resettle, but it was too big. The land was seen as cursed. The cities were left behind, abandoned to memory. To understand that kind of total change, there's a modern example. Mount St. Helens, 1980. In moments, a forested landscape became a gray wasteland, Spirit Lake filled with debris, valleys filled with hundreds of feet of ash. The land was permanently altered. Pompeii was like that, but with ancient cities in the way. This new, silent, gray world became a legend, a story about cities lost to the mountain. Over the decades and centuries, the exact locations faded from maps. They lived on only in pieces of history, but that completeness of the burial, it held a secret. It created a perfect seal, a time capsule. The catastrophe that erased Pompeii from the earth was also what kept it for the future. For a long time, the only story we had about that day came from across the water. It was from a young man who saw it all happen from far away. 25 years later, a Roman writer, Pliny the Younger, wrote 2 letters. The historian Tacitus had asked him for the story. Tacitus wanted to know how Pliny's uncle died. That uncle was Pliny the Elder, a naturalist, and he was in charge of the Roman fleet at. In writing back, Pliny did something remarkable. He gave us the only eyewitness account we have from the ancient world of a volcano erupting. He was 17 then. His account is important not because it's scientifically exact, but because it's human. He watched from about 18 miles off while his uncle made a choice. Pliny the Elder, always the scholar, had ships prepared. He said he needed to go closer, partly to study it, partly to rescue people he knew on the coast. It was a mix of curiosity and bravery that ended up killing him. The letters describe his uncle sailing toward the ash cloud, landing at, and then dying, probably from the bad air or from a heart problem made worse by the ash. Scholars who read these letters see 2 things in them. They're a careful report, but they're also a shaped story, written well after the fact by a good writer. That doesn't mean they're false. It just means we have to read them as both history and literature. The most famous part gave a name to volcanology. Pliny wrote that the cloud going up looked most like a pine tree, a tall trunk with branches spreading out at the top. Because of that exact description, we still call those huge eruption columns Plinian. He then lists the practical horrors. The shower of pumice stones was so heavy his uncle's group tied pillows to their heads. The ground shook so much carts wouldn't stay put. The sea got pulled back by the disturbance, and then tsunamis crashed in. These details aren't just for drama. They became a real key for modern science. When they started digging up Pompeii and looking at the layers in the ground, they could match those layers to what Pliny wrote. The pumice layer, the ash layers from the column collapsing, even signs of tsunamis. His words gave a timeline, a human sequence to connect to the physical evidence. To see how rare a direct account like this is, think of another diarist from a different disaster. In 1666, a Londoner named John wrote about the Great Fire. He wrote about the flames moving, the panic, the sound of buildings falling. Like Pliny, he was an educated observer. His personal record adds feeling to an event that could just be dates and damage numbers. Pliny's letters do that for Pompeii. They're the essential human voice. They take us past the geology and the quiet ruins, and they let us stand next to that teenager on a far shore, watching a mountain turn into something monstrous. And in his last thoughts on the darkness and the long, scared time that followed, the letters also point to the deep quiet that would cover the buried towns. A quiet that would last for ages. The silence in the mountains lasted for centuries. Pompeii and the towns around it didn't just vanish from the land, they faded from memory. That deep, uniform blanket of ash created a new plain, a fertile one. Grass and scrub took root over the decades. Then farmers came. They planted vineyards and orchards in that rich volcanic soil. They plowed over streets they never knew were there. They built houses, and the foundations of those houses rested on ancient roofs. The city's name lived on only in scattered medieval texts, just a vague reference to a somewhere in the region. Its exact location was a mystery. That's a profound kind of forgetting. An entire urban center, home to thousands, just disappears from the map and from consciousness. The answer is in the scale of the burial, and in the tumultuous times that came after. The eruption in 79 was a cataclysm but for the wider Roman Empire it was one crisis among many. Historians note this period: political instability, economic strain, frontier wars. The region's infrastructure was shattered, trade routes were disrupted, survivors scattered. In the grand narrative of a struggling empire, the loss of a few coastal towns, however dramatic, could just recede into legend. The land itself held secrets, but they were stumbled upon, not sought. For over 1,000 years there was sporadic digging, undocumented. A farmer's plow would strike a mosaic floor. A well digger would tunnel into a hollow space lined with painted walls. Opportunistic looters would follow these clues. They'd burrow narrow tunnels through the compacted ash to strip marble facings or statues from buried villas. They had no concept of the city beneath their feet. They were mining a forgotten landscape for valuable fragments, with no understanding of the whole. This pattern isn't unique. Loss and vague memory. Think of the legendary city of Troy from Homer's epics. For centuries, scholars debated whether it was a real place or pure myth, until excavations in the late 19th century. Or consider the Inca citadel hidden in the Peruvian Andes, known locally but lost to the wider world until 1911. In each case, a vibrant place passed into folklore, before re-emerging into history. For Pompeii, this long slumber was, ironically, a blessing. The very completeness of its burial protected it, and the loss of its location. It was spared the fate of other classical sites. Sites that were continuously inhabited, or for building stone, or systematically dismantled over the centuries. The ash was a preservative, but the forgetting was a shield. That accidental safeguarding meant something. When the world finally turned its attention back to this stretch of coast, it wouldn't find a picked-over ruin. It would find a sealed capsule, waiting to share its story with a new age. The silence was about to be broken. In the spring of 1748, a surveyor was working for the new king of Naples. They were digging a canal, just a water project for a palace, and near the workers hit something, not rock, a wall with color on it, frescoes. They'd broken into an ancient room, wrote about finding paintings, some medals. King Charles collected antiquities, so he ordered more digging, to bring beautiful things to his palace. That was the start, the accidental find. They didn't know it was Pompeii then. They thought it was the old resort. So the digging had one goal, find treasure. They called it cava. Teams went into the ash, often convicts. Their instruction was to follow the walls. They made tunnels, propped up ceilings, looking for statues, mosaics, cut them out, haul them away. The context didn't matter. A mural might be saved, but the room around it was destroyed. It was crude, destructive, but it was also a revelation. Europe was seeing Roman art in place, not as fragments. Whole scenes coming out of the ground. The royal collection grew. Then in 1763 they found an inscription, Republica of the. That solved it. This was Pompeii. That changed things. It became more of a historical mission then, still not scientific but more organized. You can see a similar moment much later. In 1974, farmers in China were digging a well. Their shovels hit a soldier's head. That find led to the whole army guarding the first emperor's tomb. Like Pompeii, it was a chance encounter, a door to the past. The early work at Pompeii was that door. It started the conversation, a slow, messy one, and the deepest answers would come later, not from the art or the gold, from a simple technique, using plaster, a way to confront the city's final moments. The early treasure hunters left a hollowed-out shell. They missed the true treasure. It wasn't in the gold, it wasn't in the marble. It was in the hollow spaces. For decades, workers had noticed strange cavities in the ash. They'd tunnel right through them. They dismissed them as pockets of air. It took a new director of excavations to see these voids for what they were, the negative imprints of lost lives. In 1863, made a decision. He told his team to pour liquid plaster of Paris into one of these cavities. They let it set. Then they chipped away the volcanic material around it. What emerged wasn't a skeleton. It was a sculpture, a perfect form of a human body in its final moment. The plaster had filled the space left by decomposed tissue. It captured every detail the ash had molded. The drape of a tunic, the curl of fingers, the contour of a face. With that one act, gave the people of Pompeii back their shape. He restored their humanity. That was the heart of his revolution. He ended the treasure hunting. He started a systematic approach. He divided the entire buried city into a grid, 9 regions, each with numbered blocks. Excavation was to be layer by layer, recording the position of every object, every wall, every cast. The goal wasn't extraction anymore. It was understanding. Preservation and context became everything. For the first time, Pompeii was studied as a city, not a mine. The plaster casting was the most powerful tool in this. The process itself is a lesson in preservation. When the hot ash settled around a victim, it compacted and hardened. It created a solid mold. Inside, the organic remains decayed over centuries. They left a perfect cavity. His genius was recognizing these hollows weren't empty. They were full of information. By filling them, he created a 3-dimensional record of the eruption's final seconds. The casts that resulted are forensic documents. They freeze a single instant. We see the muleteer, found crouched as if sheltering, his expression fixed in a silent cry. We see families huddled together. Their postures speak of a shared end. The folds of their clothing tell us about Roman textiles. Their poses offer clues about the direction of the heat wave. Modern science has taken it further. Researchers now use CT scanning on these plaster casts. The scans peer inside. They reveal the skeletons within. They let scientists study bone density, age, health. They can see the precise cause of passing without damaging the fragile exterior form. It's a non-invasive autopsy across two. This method was a precursor to modern forensic archaeology, the kind practiced at disaster sites today. When forensic teams document a scene, they map the location of every piece of evidence. They know context is everything. The position of a person, the objects around them, these things tell the story of their last actions. Insisted on that same principle. He understood a coin found in a hand was different from a coin on a floor. One was a possession held tight, the other was lost in chaos. This technique turned anonymous skeletons into individual stories. It made the scale of the tragedy viscerally real, and it provided the human-scale clues that let us piece together the eruption's final moments. The silent plaster forms became the most eloquent witnesses. Their testimony still guides the analysis. Plaster gave them back their form, but now modern science is giving them back their lives. So the plaster casts aren't the final word anymore. They're the starting point. A new kind of interrogation. Today you have an interdisciplinary team. Volcanologists, forensic scientists. They treat the whole site like a massive crime scene. Their tools are scanners and spectrometers, 21st century tools, and their goal is to read the story written in the ash and in the bones, to read it at a molecular level. Take the work of Giuseppe. She spent years studying the skeletal remains from Pompeii, not just the famous casts, but the hundreds of individuals found as bones within the volcanic debris. By analyzing these remains, she built a demographic profile, a profile of the city in its final hours. Her research showed a population that was generally healthy, signs of hard physical labor, but more striking were her studies of skull shapes and dental features. They showed something else. A significant portion of the victims weren't native to the area. They had come to Pompeii from elsewhere in the Roman world, for trade or for work. That single finding transforms the view. It wasn't just a local community that was lost. It was a cosmopolitan hub, a snapshot of the entire empire's movement and connection, frozen in a single afternoon. The technology they apply is breathtaking in its precision. CT scanners now peer inside the plaster casts without breaking them. They reveal the skeletons inside in perfect detail. That allows scientists to determine age, gender, even specific injuries or illnesses. Isotope analysis of teeth and bones tells a story of diet and migration. The chemical signatures locked in dental enamel can reveal where a person grew up, what they ate, when they might have moved to a new region. It's a biography written in chemistry. Meanwhile, other scientists focus on the volcano's behavior. They use gas chromatography on the volcanic deposits. This process can detect the faintest traces of elements and compounds. It has revealed the exact composition of the lethal cloud, its mix of carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and other gases. They analyze the ash layers under electron microscopes, reading the minerals to calculate the temperature of each successive pyroclastic surge. We now know the first wave to hit Pompeii was likely around 300 degrees Celsius. The later, denser flows exceeded 500. This data isn't just numbers. It explains the instantaneous nature of what happened. At those temperatures, survival is measured in breaths, not minutes. Even the victims' final moments are being reconstructed, with an eerie clarity. Researchers have found that in some cases the hot ash mixed with moisture from the body and the surrounding debris, that created a chemical reaction. It formed a shell of minerals like gypsum around the soft tissue. This process created natural casts, preserving details like earlobes and fabric folds, long before plaster ever arrived. In other cases, the extreme heat caused immediate muscular contraction. The so-called pugilistic posture, locking the body in its final stance. This forensic approach mirrors other historical disaster investigations. Consider the ongoing study of the RMS Titanic. Sonar mapping, 3D modeling, metallurgical analysis of the wreckage. They don't just show a sunken ship. They reveal the forces that broke it apart, the water temperature that night, even the personal effects that tell stories of individual passengers. It's the same principle at Pompeii. Every scrap of data is a clue. From a speck of pollen in a drain to the lead content in a water pipe. The narrative is being rewritten, second by second. We are moving past the broad strokes of history into a granular, heartbreakingly specific timeline. We know not just that they were overcome, but how. And this precise understanding of the catastrophe's mechanics leads to a final question, a sobering question. What in the end was the exact cause that stilled the city for a long time? The story we knew was slow, that the people in Pompeii were buried alive, that they suffocated under all that ash. But that changed now. The real ending was much faster, and it depended on exactly what part of the eruption reached them. What scientists agree on now is something very specific: extreme thermal shock. The research from people like was key. They didn't just study where the bodies were, they looked at the bones under microscopes, and they saw the signs of intense, rapid heat. Bone changes under that kind of temperature. It can crack, it can warp, the color shifts. And the patterns in the Pompeii bones all point to heat between 250 and 500 degrees. At the high end of that, death isn't just instant, it's virtually instantaneous. The heat from a pyroclastic surge would vaporize soft tissue right away. It would cause violent muscle spasms, locking the body into those final poses we see in the casts. That's the pugilistic stance. It's the body's last reaction to overwhelming heat, and the evidence rules out a slower death. People who suffocate from ash or gas usually show different signs. There's often a period of distress. You might see hands at throats, poses that show a struggle for air. Those protective gestures, they're mostly not there in Pompeii. The postures there show a system shutting down, overwhelmed in a flash. Even the teeth tell a story. Intense heat makes the moisture inside teeth expand fast, cracking the enamel. And that's been seen too. This helps explain the difference between Pompeii and Herculaneum. Herculaneum got the first and the hottest flows. Temperatures there probably went over 500 degrees, maybe 600. At that extreme, the effect was more total. The heat was so fierce it might have vaporized bodies almost instantly, leaving only bones that were carbonized. For Pompeii, a few miles further away and hit by slightly later surges, the heat was still lethal, but it left the cavities, the spaces that became the plaster casts. To understand how it works, you can think of a modern parallel. In industrial flash fires or in the worst wildfires, the cause of death often isn't the flames, it's the radiant heat. It overwhelms the body's ability to cope all at once. The eruption surges were that, but on a massive scale. This detail changes how we see the city's last moments. It swaps a story of long suffering for one of abrupt finality, and that suddenness is why everything was preserved. The heat didn't just end lives, it sterilized the scene, it stopped decay. It created the molds that captured gestures in mid-action, a man reaching for a door, a woman sheltering a child. Those weren't poses held in slow agony. They were snapshots frozen by a wave of immense energy. So in understanding the cause, you see the volcano's raw power, but you also see the strange gift it left. A moment of Roman life stopped not with a whimper but with a flash of heat. And held there in perfect suspension for us to find, these plaster forms show the end, but the city shows the life. Walking through Pompeii, you're not just seeing ruins. You're stepping into frozen moments. It's an open-air museum. Every object tells a story. In a bakery on the Via Nola, there are millstones for grinding grain, and in the oven, the carbonized remains of loaves, 81 of them, round and scored, waiting for a customer who never came. In a tavern near the Forum, bronze coins are scattered on a counter, left in the middle of a transaction. A house, the house of the tragic poet, has its mosaic at the entrance, a chained dog in black and white tiles, with the words "Cave beware of the dog." It's a universal sentiment, a homeowner's warning from 2,000 years ago, and we'd understand it instantly. These tableaus make Pompeii intimate. Archaeologist Mary Beard emphasizes this. The finds here don't just show emperors and legions. They show people with daily worries, a sense of humor, domestic routines. The grand public buildings like the Forum with its temples speak to civic life and imperial power. But then you have the fulleries, the laundries. They used human urine as a cleaning agent, a practical, pungent detail of urban living. Though one of the brothels has small rooms and explicit frescoes, they served as a menu of services. It reveals an unvarnished part of the city's fabric. Look closer and the details get more personal. In the House of the Faun, one of the largest villas, they found carbonized fruit, figs, dates, nuts in a wooden bowl. In other buildings, delicate surgical tools. bronze scalpels and forceps telling us about medical practices. The walls are covered in graffiti but carved messages, political endorsements for local elections, declarations of love, insults. One famous scrawl says, "I am here and I'm waiting." A voice from the shadows, immediate and haunting. This level of preservation where organic material survives is rare. For a smaller scale comparison, there's the bog site in Florida. A peat bog preserved brain tissue and fabric from indigenous people over 7,000 years ago. The acidic, oxygen-poor environment halted decay, much like the ash at Pompeii, but on a much more limited, burial-focused scale. Pompeii's preservation is urban, comprehensive. It's not just bodies or tools. It's an entire functioning town. That's the heart of the site's magic. It offers an intimacy with the past that's unmatched. You see frescoes on the walls not in a glass case but in the rooms they were meant to decorate. You see ruts worn into the stone streets by cart wheels leading to the doors of homes and shops. This intimacy pulls the ancient world out of abstraction into the tangible. We aren't just learning about history. We are peering through a window left ajar by catastrophe into a living, breathing world that was, in its final afternoon, just going about its day. The first thing you notice is the color. The frescoes in Pompeii, after all that time under the ash, they're just vibrant. Deep reds, yellows, blues, they glow. And that's the strange gift of the volcano. That gray ash sealed everything, blocked the sun, the moisture, the air. In Rome, the frescoes in the Forum, they've faded. They're ghosts. But here, buried in an afternoon, the whole palette of a culture just survived. It's an archive of Roman taste, not what historians guess, but what they actually lived with. You can see the evolution right on the walls. Art historians call them the styles. The first style, they called it the incrustation style. It was painted plaster made to look like marble panels, an illusion of wealth. Then the second style, the illusion, became architectural. They painted columns, balconies, made a flat wall look deep like it opened onto a landscape. The third style shifted, more refined. Delicate frames around small central paintings, often myths, like a jewel in a setting. Then the fourth style, which was popular when the eruption happened. It was a synthesis. The architectural fantasies came back, but more crowded, more fantastical. Mixed with narrative panels, still lifes, it's theatrical. Walking into a fourth style villa feels like stepping onto a stage set. And this wasn't just for the elite. Even a modest bakery, a shopkeeper's home, they'd have decorative borders, simple figures, imitations of stone. It shows a society where beauty was everyday. Art was in the background of domestic life. Some pieces just stop you. In the House of the Faun, one of the largest homes, there's the Alexander mosaic, a floor mosaic. It shows Alexander the Great confronting at the Battle of, made from over 1.5 million tiny tiles. It captures the chaos, the fear in his eyes, Alexander's determination. They think it's a copy of a famous Greek painting. Shows how Roman art revered the Greek masters. Then there's the Villa of the Mysteries just outside the walls. The main room has a continuous fresco, life-sized figures. It shows what looks like a ritual initiation. A young woman being prepared, others dancing, reading. The background is this deep red, so the figures seem to emerge from the wall. The meaning is still debated, a marriage or a Dionysian cult initiation. But the emotional intensity is clear. This is art that immerses you, not just decorates. The architecture for this art was advanced too. Roman concrete allowed for stronger vaults, bigger spaces. The classic house was built around the atrium, a central courtyard that collected rainwater. That was the heart of the home. Beyond that, often a garden courtyard, the peristyle with columns. The plumbing was sophisticated. Lead pipes brought fresh water from aqueducts. They had flushing latrines, heated bath systems. Pompeii is this blend of aesthetic ambition and practical engineering. To see the miracle, you contrast it with Rome. The frescoes in Nero's or homes on the Palatine Hill, they've been exposed to pollution, rain, temperature changes for 2,000 years. They're faded, blurred. At Pompeii, the ash was a time capsule. It locked in that peak vibrancy. This art is the colorful soul of the gray city, and it makes you wonder, what did these scenes mean to them? Myths, rituals, landscapes, were they just decoration or something deeper, religious, protective? It reflects a mindset trying to control their environment through beauty, to connect with gods and heroes, to impress their peers. It's a direct line to their hopes, their beliefs, their joy in creation. A line drawn not in fading ink, but in pigments preserved by catastrophe. Their art was so vibrant, and it wasn't just decoration. It was a plea to the divine. In Pompeii, the spiritual world wasn't separate. It was woven into everything, into the grand temples in the Forum and into the tiny shrine in a baker's kitchen. This was a society deeply engaged with the gods, always seeking protection, always seeking favor. But there's a paradox at the heart of their faith. They lived in the shadow of a slumbering giant, Mount Vesuvius, but they didn't worship it. It wasn't a major deity for them. Their attention was directed elsewhere, to a whole host of other powers they believed governed their fate. The public face of religion was impressive. The Temple of Apollo, one of the city's oldest, stood near the Forum. Its columns still rise against the sky. They honored the god of prophecy there, of healing, and the sun. Not far away was the grand temple of Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva. That was the center of state religion, a symbol of Roman power and piety. But the spiritual landscape was diverse. Just a short walk away, archaeologists found a large temple to the Egyptian goddess Isis. Her cult was popular. It promised personal salvation, a direct connection to the divine. This blending of Roman, Greek, and Eastern gods was typical. It shows a pragmatic spirituality. People were looking for answers, for comfort, from any source that seemed powerful. But the most intimate faith happened at home. In nearly every residence, from the grandest villa to the smallest shop, you'd find a household shrine. These were often painted niches or small cupboards. They held statuettes of the Lares, the protective spirits of the household and the family ancestors. Each day, the head of the family would make a small offering, a bit of wine, some fruit, a pinch of incense. It was a daily ritual to maintain the peace of the home, its prosperity. This shows how religion was domestic, a routine part of safeguarding everyday life. Beyond the temples and the family gods, there was a thick layer of superstition, personal magic. Walk through the ruins and you'll see phallic symbols carved onto street corners above shop doors. These weren't vulgar. They were considered powerful charms meant to ward off the evil eye, to attract good fortune. Amulets were common, found on the remains of many individuals. Little carved figures, gems, or bells worn for protection. Then there were the curse tablets. Thin sheets of lead, inscribed with messages to the gods of the underworld, asking them to bind an enemy, to harm them. Someone would write a curse, roll the lead sheet up, and nail it in a grave or toss it into a well, believing the chthonic gods would enact their wish. This mix of formal worship and practical magic reveals a mindset that sought control. Control over an uncertain world through every available channel. Classicists note a key insight. For the divine was immediate. It was transactional. You made an offering and you expected a return. You wore a charm to deflect bad luck. You consulted an astrologer before a business deal. The gods were part of the fabric of cause and effect. This makes the eruption's aftermath especially poignant. For the survivors, for those who heard the news, how did they explain it? While we have no direct accounts, historians suggest it would almost certainly have been framed as divine wrath. The Roman mind would have sought a reason in the realm of the gods. Was it Jupiter, king of the gods, expressing his anger? Or perhaps Vulcan, the god of fire and the forge, making his power known from beneath the earth? Some may have seen it as a failure of their own rituals, a sign that their offerings had not been enough. This pattern is deeply human, interpreting natural disaster through a spiritual lens. Consider the Great Lisbon earthquake of 1755. That devastating event on a holy day sparked intense debate across Europe. Was it an act of divine punishment, as many clergy proclaimed, or a natural phenomenon, as Enlightenment philosophers argued? The people of the Roman world, without our modern geological understanding, would have leaned overwhelmingly toward the former. The mountain's awakening would have been read as a message, a terrifying, incomprehensible message from the gods they had spent their lives trying to appease. This spiritual dimension completes the picture of the psyche. It wasn't just a bustling, artistic, practical society. It was a society deeply conscious of forces beyond its control, trying to navigate them with ritual, with charm, and with prayer. Their entire worldview, this intricate system of belief and superstition, was about to face a test far beyond any myth, a test whose evidence still lies in the ground. Waiting in the form of a small amulet clenched in a hand, or a painted facing a wall of falling ash, the spiritual world of Pompeii was a plea for control. But the physical city, it still holds secrets, secrets that control us. The story today is still being written, not by historians in libraries, by archaeologists with trowels and scanners in the dirt. The focus has shifted to a long-neglected area. 5. This is the modern frontier of Pompeii. A major new excavation campaign began here in 2018, and it has been spectacular. The finds are pulling back another layer, offering fresh glimpses, startling glimpses into the city's final act. This isn't the treasure hunting of the 1700s. Modern archaeology at Pompeii is a delicate science, conservation first. The director, Gabriel, emphasizes this shift. The primary goal is no longer just to uncover new streets and buildings. It is to stabilize and preserve the immense site we already have, which is under constant threat. From weather, from invasive plant roots, from the sheer weight of its own history. Every new excavation is a calculated risk. Exposing a fresco to sunlight and moisture can begin its rapid decay. So the team uses non-invasive technologies. Drones map the site from above, creating three-dimensional models. Laser scanners capture the precise geometry of a crumbling wall. Before a single stone is touched, micro-excavation techniques remove volcanic material grain by grain, revealing fragile objects, a carbonized wooden bed, a basket of eggs without damaging them. The rewards of this approach have been breathtaking. In 5, they uncovered a lane of elegant houses. The House of the Enchanted Garden. Its courtyard walls are alive with frescoes, lush painted gardens, detailed birds, a majestic peacock, all surrounding a beautiful fountain. It's a vivid testament to the Roman desire to bring nature and beauty into their homes. In another building, likely a shop, they found a small collection, a cache of beads and amulets, carved buttons, precious stones, amber and amethyst. They believe it may have been a sorceress's treasure, used for rituals or protection. Then there was the stable, where they recovered the plaster cast of a horse, its form captured in a moment of distress, complete with a bronze harness. Each find is a data point, adding nuance to our understanding of the city's fabric, the social and economic fabric. Perhaps the most headline-grabbing discovery was a simple charcoal inscription, a date. It read the 16th day before the calends of November, which translates to October 17th. Charcoal is perishable. It would not have survived long exposed to the elements. So this strongly suggests the eruption happened after this date, not on the traditional August 24th. This single scribble has forced out of the timeline, reminding us that even the most basic facts are subject to revision with new evidence. The work is painstakingly slow, and for good reason. The moment a wall or a floor is exposed, the clock starts ticking. Rainwater seeps into ancient plaster. Sunlight fades pigments that were vibrant for centuries in the dark. The roots of modern weeds can crack foundations. Managing this while also accommodating millions of visitors is a colossal task, never-ending. It mirrors challenges at other sites. Take in Turkey, one of the world's oldest known proto-cities. Excavations there also proceed with extreme care. They reveal not grand palaces but intimate details, Neolithic domestic life, oven locations, sleeping platforms, burial practices beneath floors. Like Pompeii, it is a site where the story of daily existence is gently from the earth, year after year. Discovery by discovery. These digs in 5 prove a point. Pompeii is far from a finished story. It is not a museum whose catalog is complete. It is a living archaeological site. Every new trench, every laser scan raises new questions even as it answers old ones. What other inscriptions might shift our timeline? What other homes hold perfectly preserved snapshots? The mountain froze the city in an afternoon, but it gifted us a puzzle that will take centuries more to solve. And with each new fragment, we get closer to the people who lived there, not as tragic figures, but as neighbors, whose world for one last day was simply alive. That charcoal mark, it's a small crack in the timeline. And that crack has opened into a real historical debate. So when did the mountain finally wake? The answer always seemed settled. August 24th, 79. That's the date in every textbook. It comes from the oldest copies we have of Pliny the Younger's letters. But those copies are medieval. They were written centuries after the event. The original manuscripts are lost. And now the ground itself is whispering a different story, a story of autumn. Evidence is piling up. It starts with what was left behind. In the ruins, they've found carbonized remains of autumn fruits, pomegranates ripe and full, walnuts, chestnuts. These aren't August harvests. In a tavern, they uncovered a brazier, a portable heater. Why would you need a heater in the heat of a Campanian August? Then there are the victims. Some were found wearing heavier woolen clothing suited to cooler weather. And maybe most compelling, a coin. a silver denarius found in a wealthy's house. It bears the image of Emperor Titus, and it commemorates his 15th acclamation as emperor. Historical records show that acclamation happened after September 8, 79. For that coin to have made its way to Pompeii, circulated, been stored in a home, the eruption had to have happened later, likely October. This isn't just guesswork, it's a forensic re-examination. Pliny's own account is being looked at again. He describes his uncle sailing across the bay to investigate, but he never actually names the month. The traditional August date comes from a single word in those later manuscript copies, a word scholars now think could be a scribal error. A medieval copyist transcribing a faded Roman text might have misread the abbreviation for October as a single letter's difference over 1,000 years that changed our whole mental picture of the season. The natural world adds its own clues. Volcanologists studying wind patterns note that the prevailing winds in the Bay of Naples shift with the seasons. The precise direction of the which buried Pompeii to the southeast fits autumn wind patterns better than the winds of high summer. Each piece of evidence, from a roasted chestnut to a wind model, points toward a cooler, later date. This kind of historical revision isn't unique. Our understanding of the deep past is always being refined by new data. Take the colossal eruption of Thera in the Aegean, which devastated the Minoan civilization. For decades, the date was pinned to around 1500 BCE. Then, in the 1980s, scientists began analyzing ice cores from Greenland and tree rings from ancient Irish oaks. They found a sharp, global climatic signal around 1628 BCE. The evidence from nature pushed the date back over a century. It rewrote the timeline of the ancient Mediterranean. The Pompeii date debate is a quieter version of that same process. It shows a fundamental truth about history. It's not a static list of facts carved in stone. It's a living conversation between the written record and the physical evidence. The written word gives us the narrative, the human voice. But the silent artifacts, the seeds, the coins, the layers of ash, they are the corroborating witnesses. When they contradict the old story, we have to listen. This shift from August to October, it's more than an academic footnote. It changes the sensory texture of that final day. It wasn't the blazing heat of a Mediterranean summer. It was the crisp air of autumn. The light would have been different, golden and slanted. The harvest would have been in. It adds a layer of poignant normalcy. People were preparing for winter, lighting braziers, eating the season's bounty. Their world ended not at the peak of the year's warmth, but as it was turning inward. This ongoing debate is a powerful reminder. Our understanding of that single catastrophic afternoon is still evolving, just as our understanding of the mountain that caused it continues to change. And that brings us to the most pressing question. The mountain isn't just a relic of the past, it's a sleeping giant in the present. What does its future hold? That debate we had that afternoon, it stuck with me. Vesuvius isn't some relic, it's a presence. Right now, more than 3 million people live in its shadow. That's Naples, the whole modern sprawl, and all those towns on its slopes, which makes this one of the most dangerous volcanic zones on the planet. The mountain's just dormant, it's not extinct. And its history is Plinian eruptions, violent ones. So any future event wouldn't just hit a Roman town. It would hit one of the most densely packed urban areas in Europe. That shadow it casts is literal, and it's a metaphor. A constant, quiet question mark over what comes next. To answer it, scientists keep watch. There's an observatory on the flanks. It's the oldest volcano observatory in the world, founded in 1841. Its job is to listen. They have a network of instruments like a stethoscope on the Earth's heart. Seismographs catch the faintest tremors, the groans of magma moving down deep. GPS stations measure the ground bulging just slightly from pressure building inside. And sensors sniff the air. They analyze gases seeping from vents. A change in the mix, a spike in carbon dioxide or sulfur, that can be an early warning. Modern volcanologists, like the ones there, they've mapped out how a reawakening would likely go. It wouldn't be sudden. First, you'd get earthquake swarms, hundreds of small tremors growing in frequency and strength. That's the rock fracturing as magma pushes up. Then the ground would start to deform. It would swell like a balloon filling. And finally, the gas emissions would spike. These are the vital signs. They monitor them around the clock because it gives you a window, maybe weeks, maybe even months to act before an eruption starts. That forecasting science is the foundation for something huge, the Vesuvius Emergency Plan. It centers on a red zone, the area at highest risk from pyroclastic flows. The goal is staggering: evacuate over 600,000 people within 72 hours of an order. The logistics are mind-boggling: coordinating trains, buses, ships, moving a population bigger than many cities to host regions across Italy. They run drills, public campaigns, but the scale is unprecedented. It's a race against geological time, a test of organization and public trust. And this modern reality echoes the ancient one in a psychological way. Just like the people in Pompeii normalized the tremors before 79, there's a human tendency toward risk normalization in Naples today. Generations have lived here, thrived here. The volcano is a postcard backdrop. Its slopes are covered in homes and vineyards. The daily routine makes the unthinkable feel distant. Overcoming that complacency, staying vigilant for an event that might not happen for decades or centuries, that's as much a part of the hazard as the geology itself. You can see a similar dynamic elsewhere. In the Pacific Northwest of the US, Mount Rainier towers over Seattle-Tacoma. It's also an active, dangerous stratovolcano. It can produce massive lahars, deadly mudflows of melted ice and rock that could reach populated valleys in under an hour. There, too, scientists from the U.S. Geological Survey monitor intensely. Evacuation routes are marked with special signs. Communities practice lahar drills, trying to ingrain a response to a threat that feels abstract until it is. So the story of Pompeii goes beyond history. It's a permanent lesson in the dialogue between human settlement and planetary force. The preserved city is more than an archaeological treasure. It's a benchmark, a frozen moment that gives us a precise measure of the volcano's power. It informs every modern risk model, every evacuation timeline. It reminds us that preparedness isn't about living in fear. It's about living with respect. Respect for the immense, patient processes of the earth. And for the fragile, vibrant communities we build in their shadow. The silence of those ruins speaks to our present. It urges vigilance, planning, and a deep understanding that the past isn't truly past when the mountains still breathe. The mountain is still breathing. But the city it buried, that's become something else. It's moved past its own tragedy. It's become a kind of mirror. For everyone, Pompeii holds us, not because it's ancient, because it's familiar. It's the ultimate memento. A stark, beautiful reminder. Our own world just as fragile, just as fleeting. But it's more than that. It's a bridge, a direct connection to the full spectrum of human life. The frescoes show love and myth. The graffiti shows ambition, petty squabbles, the carbonized bread, the scattered coins. They show a workday interrupted. In those details, 2,000 years collapse into a single shared afternoon. We don't see primitive ancestors. We see neighbors, people who worried about money, cherished their families, enjoyed a good meal, sought protection from forces they couldn't control. That intimacy, that's why it echoes through our culture. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the excavations revealed these vivid scenes. It ignited the romantic imagination. The ruins became a symbol of the sublime, the terrifying beauty of nature's power over human ambition. Painters like he created monumental canvases. The Last Day of Pompeii, blending archaeological detail with dramatic emotion, bringing the catastrophe to life for a public hungry for sensation. The site directly inspired Edwards' novel, The Last Days of Pompeii from 1834, wildly popular. That book spawned operas, plays, eventually the epic films of the 20th century, each retelling from silent movies to modern documentaries. They all grapple with the same fascination, the sudden intersection of ordinary life and absolute cataclysm. Beyond the pop culture footprint, there's a deeper legacy, an intellectual one. Pompeii is the birthplace of modern archaeology. The meticulous grid-based methods, pioneered by, they set a standard for the entire field. It became the first large-scale laboratory for volcanology, teaching us how stratovolcanoes behave, what their deposits mean. For disaster management, it's the foundational case study, informing every modern risk assessment for communities near active volcanoes. Cultural historians point to something else. Pompeii did something revolutionary. It challenged the idea of temporal superiority. Before its excavation, the classical past was often a marble ideal, distant, heroic. Pompeii showed the chips in the marble, the messiness, the jokes on the walls. It proved ancient people weren't just noble statues. They were complex, emotional, fully modern in their concerns. That realization reshaped our entire relationship with history. which brings us to the ethical heart of its legacy. The modern concept of cultural heritage. Pompeii forced the world to ask difficult questions. How do we preserve something so vast and fragile? Who does this past belong to? And how do we display human remains with dignity? The site became a global benchmark for conservation ethics. The ongoing tension between excavation, preservation, and public access, it's played out here every single day. It teaches us that heritage isn't just about uncovering the past. It's about stewarding it responsibly for the future. To understand its unique weight, compare it to other sites. The Egyptian pyramids inspire awe at pharaonic power and engineering. Stonehenge evokes mystery about prehistoric belief, but Pompeii does something different. It inspires empathy. We walk its streets and feel the sun they felt, see the same view from their windows. Its legacy isn't one of mysterious gods or anonymous kings, it's the baker, the shopkeeper, the child. That's why its pull remains so strong. It makes history visceral and personal. It compels us to look back, not as spectators of a remote drama, but as participants in the same human story. A story of daily striving, set against the immense and patient clock of the earth. In that look backward, we inevitably find ourselves looking forward, considering what fragments of our own world might one day speak to those who come after. That afternoon, the sequence was a geological symphony. Immense power, terrible precision. It started with tremors. People just heard them as background noise. Then it crescendoed, a towering column of ash, a Plinian plume. It darkened the sun. It rained pumice for hours. Then came the fatal shift. That column collapsed. It became searing, ground-hugging surges. They raced down the mountain at impossible speeds. And it ended with a final sigh, fine ash settling. A soft blanket that sealed everything for centuries. That timeline is there now in the layers of the earth. A minute-by-minute forensic report. But the true wonder isn't the destruction, it's the preservation. The volcano's violence created a perfect snapshot. It froze a bustling Roman town, not in a moment of decline, in the full flow of an ordinary day. That's the profound paradox of Pompeii, a story of ending that became a story of discovery. It offers an unparalleled record, a window you can step through. You see the baker's loaves in the oven. You read the political ads on the walls. You feel the presence of people just living their lives. This record forces a confrontation with themes that resonate today. The fragility of human civilization against the raw, patient power of the natural world. The critical importance of heeding scientific warnings. Of not normalizing the subtle tremors that signal greater danger. And maybe most powerfully, the connections we share with people across time. Their hopes, their routines, their fears. They're not so different from our own. The historian Mary Beard captured that essence. She said Pompeii is the one place where you can truly walk in the footsteps of Romans, a privilege born of a tragedy. It's a somber privilege but a priceless one. It asks for reflection. What does Pompeii mean? Is it a cautionary tale about our own cities, built in the shadows of sleeping giants? Is it a reminder of the enduring human spirit, captured in art and everyday objects? Or is it just a bridge, making the ancient world feel immediate and real? However you connect with it, Pompeii's legacy is a call to learn. To build more resilient societies by understanding the past, to listen to the earth, and to cherish the fragile, vibrant tapestry of daily life. The ashes of that afternoon froze a moment in time, but they ignited an endless curiosity about our shared human story.